There were no controls on that guy, on that employer, to keep him from abusing his workers that way, to keep him from setting arbitrary rules. No, you can't take time out to pee. No, you can't take time out for lunch. Yada, yada, yada. Why can't you work until 12 o'clock at night? I've got all these orders for wool and for fabric, and I want to get them filled. And so came a time of severe abuse of the proletariat, where all of a sudden the only way you could make it was to go get a job, and that job was backbreaking, hopeless, unending toil and misery, and there was no hope of ever escaping it. You couldn't work really hard until you had actually built up a surplus and become really skilled until you were commanding better prices for your work than the guy next to you. No longer was that an option. You just had to get up and go to work. How familiar is that to us? That's all of us now. The capitalists won that fight. They won. They had to give us certain concessions because they were killing us, literally killing us with overwork, and they had to give us concessions. So we have concessions instituted by government that the capitalists continue to find workarounds, like, oh, I don't have to pay you holiday pay. I don't have to give you a vacation. I put a percentage of vacation pay on your check, so I don't actually have to give you time off. And if you want to take time off, well, there's ways that I could fire you without actually firing you. It's called laid off. And then I just wait a couple of weeks and say, oh, business is picked up, but I found someone better for your job. So you better not take that vacation. That you're just going to get the pay added to your check, which is not a vacation. I'm sorry, it's not. Sick days. Oh, you got to have a doctor's note. I don't have a doctor's note. I was so sick, I couldn't go to the doctor. The doctor doesn't make house calls. You wanted me to bundle myself up when I can't even stand, and stand in line for a bus, and take the bus to the doctor's office so he can give me a piece of paper that says, yes, this woman should be in bed, and 4 hours later I'll finally get to bed. That's what, so you go to work sick, and you get sicker and sicker and sicker, and you make everybody else sick. So I'd say that the capitalists won that round. They gave us a few concessions, and they gave us really cheap food so that we don't realize we're still starving to death. And Frederick actually talks about that. He says the bourgeoisie, the people who own these factories, see, because he's not talking about the high class, the landed gentry. These are people who make money off their land because they have so much of it, and they're a whole different ball of wax, and he wasn't worrying about them. He was worrying about the bulk of the population and how the proletariat were starving in place. But when they died of starvation, it was not counted as starvation. It was counted as death by whatever disease the starvation had allowed to take root. So you don't say he starved to death, you say he died of the flu. But the flu wouldn't have killed him if he'd have been adequately fed. So Frederick says, you really can just say they starved to death. And we're still doing it, except now we've got so much cereal and pasta and beans and McDonald's and burgers and all this calorie-dense food with no nutrition. That we have all these people walking around. They're obese and malnutritioned at the same time. And we never understood that before, that you could be fat and starving to death. And so they figured out a way to feed us really cheap, using our own labor to produce it, so that they can continue to suck off of our backs all of the labor and effort that we put into what should be the betterment of ourselves and our society. So that's the thing. Socialism is about giving a damn about us, not about controlling us and putting us down. The people who say that are the capitalists who do not want to be controlled and slowed down. They want, and I don't even understand, when you've got enough to realize all your dreams. You feel you're in the mood to go to Everest today? You've got enough money to hire a bunch of people to truck your ass up to Everest. Yay! I'm on Everest! I'm so wealthy! Oh, today I want to have New York pizza. I know I'm in Beijing, but I'll just hop on the plane and go to New York. When you get to that point, that you have that kind of wealth, Why do you keep acquiring? Why must you still continue to make those numbers climb? That's a mental disease, and I don't understand it. So tomorrow, as in the future, we are going to lose all of our jobs. You know that, right? There's going to be some care and service industry jobs, and there's going to be some design industry jobs. There will still be engineers and designers, creative people. There will be creative people, and there will be service people. There will be the people who, and the service industry too will be very minor, because most of that is going to be served by androids. So there's pretty much going to be the creative side of things. People who create the dances that the robots do, people who create the programs, people who create the new inventions, people who create art. We're trying to teach computers to do creativity, but that will be the last arena of employment. And when nobody but the artist, and if you've heard of Hatsune Miku, she's a digital artist. But the thing is, all her music and all of her animations are created by humans, a wide variety of them. And they're all making some royalties off of her performances, so machines will work for us. And come then, we'll all be capitalists. And that'll be good. But at the moment, we won't own those machines. The current day capitalists will own them. And we won't be making profit off of those machines. And we won't have any money to buy the product from those machines. I suppose the capitalists are going to have to solve that problem. Because what point a product if there is no customer? Because right now, your role, my role, our role in society is to consume the product that the capitalists are making in order for the capitalists to make money off of the workers, who are also us, and or are the people in the third world who don't have the same workers' rights laws that we have. And eventually they will too have workers' rights. They will eventually have the same workers' rights, either by revolution or by our hands, our outside influence. So eventually, the capitalists will run out of consumers, because the consumers won't have jobs with which to earn the money with which to buy the product that their jobs are creating. So the capitalists are going to have to solve that little conundrum, aren't they? And some people envision a future where these same persons that we are calling capitalists, these same psychopaths, are simply using the robots to create what the psychopath needs. And the rest of us are all scrabbling in the dust, hoping, praying that we can find some raw materials to offer up for a smidgen of the product. And for the most part are living hand to mouth. And maybe we will have turned our backs on them and they're living their little enclaves, and we'll create a new society out here where all of our psychopaths run off to the enclave and hammer on the doors to join these guys with their little fancy, I don't even know what the heck they'll have in there, their ability to send out soldier bots and take from us, I guess. And for the most part, we'll just go ahead and do our thing the way we used to, making what we need, using what we need, and sharing the surplus with each other. So anyway, so November, I'm going to try and do one of these every day for the month of November, in celebration of my birthday. And if you really want me to have a happy birthday, go to YouTube, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and if you're of a mind, add a comment. I'm not going to ask you to hit the notification bell like so many YouTubers are. I don't care about the metrics that much. I think that's rude. I don't want to be notified about all 100 and however many people I follow. I don't think you do either. It's supposed to show up in the feed when I log on to YouTube, so I'm not going to ask that. But please, go to YouTube. Have some activity. That's what I want for my birthday this month. Okay? See you tomorrow. Hi, it's November 1st. Now last year I did a thing called Vlogmas, where you video log every day for the month of December. I thought, well, that's cool. At the time I thought, it'd be kind of cool if I could make my YouTube channel pay money, because then I'd have some independent income and I'd have some independence. Over the course of the year, I've come to realize that that's about as likely as a lottery win. There's way too many of us, way too little interest, and none of the people I know actually use YouTube. They watch these on Facebook. Now, Facebook does not feed back information to YouTube, so YouTube's metrics don't ever find out that anyone gives a damn what I have to say, let alone getting up to, I think it's 200,000, I don't know, maybe it's 100,000 or 10,000. You've got to have a small town worth of people following you before your ads pay off. I was checking, and my monetized videos earned up to 32 cents in the last year. So yeah, not likely to happen. I'm gonna comb out my hair while I'm chatting with you, and I'm having my morning coffee. I haven't done the dishes. Dan hasn't fully left yet, so it's extremely probable he'll interrupt in the middle of this, because he has this kind of an instinct of when is the most annoying time to turn up and to interrupt me. And if I'm annoyed about it, then he gets really, really angry with me for not being thrilled at his presence and not appreciating his existence better. So if he's being annoying and interrupting, I'm supposed to be so glad to have his attention that it doesn't annoy me. And I'm working on being more patient. It's not natural to me. It'd be nice if he just didn't have this natural instinct for interruption. I'm just grabbing a comb here. Never mind. Whatever. My marriage. Yeah. It is what it is. This is me combing out my hair. I've got a lot of it. I dyed it blue this week. I was looking at a pot of dye and thinking, whether I continue to dye my hair or not, I really ought to use up some of this dye. I have enough dye there that it seems like I could never use it all up. So I'm going to be having various colored hair. But I went with blue on top because I'm trying out a less feminine approach. I don't really want to go there in this conversation. I don't really want to talk about it a whole lot. So next step, I still have to do my dishes. I'm watching the YouTube, having my coffee. Nice quiet morning. So the reason I picked November is because it's the month in which my birthday resides. And my birthday's a sore point for me. Even since childhood, it's never lived up to expectations, and those expectations are set by observation of what other people seem to get for their birthday, and I never do. When I was a child and my parents tried to put together birthday parties for me, and I'd make a whole bunch of handmade invitations, give them all the kids in school, and nobody'd show up. There was the little girl down the street whose mother made her show up, and she made sure that I knew that she was only there because she didn't have a choice. So it was a sore point as a child. Then as I grew up, I left my family behind, and they're the only people who are even slightly obligated to give you presents, and only if you're there. So I came out into the world full of people who were really too poor, and frankly they didn't like me, and so my birthday just never got any attention. And it was a point of depression for me. And it was about 3-4 years ago, I decided, you know what? Screw it. I'm just not going to tell people when my birthday is. If they don't say happy birthday to me on my birthday, then I'm not going to be reminded that it's my birthday. And then I will not be sitting there thinking, great, happy birthday. Yeah, it's just another ordinary day though. No presents, just a whole lot of people wishing I have a happy birthday but doing nothing about it. So, I stopped telling people when my birthday was, because it really is. It's worse to say happy birthday to someone who's not going to have a happy birthday than to say nothing at all. It's like, because then they just might manage to forget that it's their birthday, and then not think about the contrast between their birthday and what the TV says it ought to be. And let's face it, most of us adults, a lot of us adults don't have a celebration on our birthday. It's really not relevant. If you've got the right people around you, they'll do something about it. They'll I don't know. You'll go to a restaurant and waiters will sing at you. They'll come to your house with a cake and sing at you. That's what happened last year. I had been on the verge of dying, and I had recently survived what should have killed me, and so I managed to get, I got a hold of the people who give a damn about me and said, listen, if there's one thing I want for my birthday, it's a minimum of 3 people singing happy birthday at me over a cake. And so I had, well, I think I posted pictures up. This is what happened. We had cake, they sang happy birthday, and it was marvelous. I loved it. I'd love to have that happen every year. But I don't have the energy. It's just too much trouble. I'd have to organize it. No one else is going to organize it, and I don't want to. I just don't want to. I don't want you to wish me a happy birthday. If you want to come over here, with something for me, and I don't care if it's a macaroni picture you made of my hair, or it's a birthday cake, or it's a little cupcake with a candle in it, or it's some fucking oh, my language, I'm sorry. It's some extravagant, I don't know, stick flamingos on my lawn and a happy birthday sign. There's a million ways people go about celebrating a birthday, but the one they don't, the one they shouldn't, is happy birthday on Facebook or in the comments on YouTube or wherever, and be done with it. Just don't. I know, you have to. Everybody's doing it, you have to do it. You don't actually. The only time I wish someone a happy birthday is when they personally post that it's their birthday. If a whole bunch of other people do, I don't. Unless, of course, you're a relative, because then I'm supposed to remember that it's your birthday, and it's all about, oh, you remembered my birthday. It's like, no, Facebook told me it was your birthday. I've never remembered a birthday. Isn't that why you never remember mine? Because I don't remember yours, and yet I don't remember yours because you don't remember mine. And well, most of the people with whom that conversation used to happen, they live 2,000 miles away. I'm supposed to mail them a card. It seems like such a waste, and I don't have the money to go mailing presents everywhere. Then, right away, there's Christmas. I don't have the money for this sort of thing. If I have a present for you, I give it to you the next time I see you. And I do give presents. The people who come over and visit me frequently come away with gifties. It's stuff that I own that I'm letting go of, especially now that I'm letting go of things to give things away. Or it's something. It might be something that I bought that I was out and I went, oh my goodness, so and so would love this. I got to give it to them, and I could afford it, and so I just give it to them. And I really resent the ritualized giving, because it takes so much of the love out of it. It puts so much obligation on you. And it wasn't created through society. It was created through the capitalists. That was what I really wanted to talk to you about, the book I started reading. You've probably heard the name Friedrich Engels. You've probably heard it in conjunction with Marx and Marxism, Marx and Engels, the fathers of the Russian Revolution and of communism. And now we're into that whole, communism is evil. It was the funniest thing. Dan said something or other about communism. I says, what do you think communism means? And he says, well, that's when a very few people dictate what everybody else has to do, or how they can do it, or where they can do it, and owns everything. He describes fascism, imperialism, as communism. And that's what the Americans have done to the whole concept of socialism and communism, which is in fact, communism is a form of socialism. So first, socialism is the notion that the needs of the people are the most important thing in society. That society is not at the behest of some chosen few born to rule type people. That society is not a game that you're playing where the strongest wins, them that's got shall get, where it's a struggle of tooth and nail where the predators win and the prey get eaten. Socialism recognizes that we as human beings should be pulling together and helping even the least of us so that we as a species will rise up. And we as a species have done exactly that. We have, by combination of both rampant self-interest and social justice, goodness, and awareness, we have risen to the top of the earthling totem pole. We now have the opportunity to decide the fate of every other earthling on the planet, or at least decide the death, and to some degree we direct their fates. And we didn't do that because we clubbed each other on the head and got bigger and fatter individually. We did that because we said, hey, Mama, let me feed you and your babies. Your man is dead. Let me help you out. Or, hey, cripple in the street, you look cold. Come sit by my fire. Let me feed you. That has more to do with human improvement than we're not letting anything get us down. We're going to get number one. I mean, the number one thing certainly is an important part of the human drive. And I don't think it's right to socialize everything. We need private capital. We need privatism. We need private possessions. I need to be able to come home at night to my quiet house, close the door, and de-stress, and not worry that some guy's going to walk in off the street, help himself to the food in my fridge, put his feet up in front of my fire, and change my TV channel and tell me how I'm going to have my evening. You know? Which in communism is when you don't own anything. With communism, you don't own your house. You don't own the shirt on your back. You don't own anything. You recognize that property is theft, that everything you have is a loan from the greater good, and that you could lose it at any moment, and that you give over control of these things to society and those people you have chosen to represent society's interests. We're going with the concept of democracy. Now, in Russia, this didn't work. It didn't work because shit floats. The cream rises to the top. No, shit floats. They like to think of themselves as cream, but we know they're not. There will always be some greedy psychopaths who really only have self-interest. And these self-interested parties will take advantage of whatever system you put in for self-aggrandization. They will do what they must do to get ahead of everybody else. And they will not settle for second place or even equality. They must be above us all. They exist. They will. You could kill every last. You could develop a psychological test that identifies them all, and you could move them all to Mars or kill them off, or you could eliminate society of that element today. In theory. I mean, you can't. But let's pretend for a moment, this utopian dream, that you could actually remove all of the psychopaths from your midst. All of them. Even the ones you didn't spot. Oh, gosh. You know how P.T. Barnum said there's a sucker born every minute? There's a psychopath born every minute, too. That's right. They're not made. They're born that way. They can't help it either. They're not useless, and they're not evil, and they're not worthless, and they have value. They have qualities that we, as a society and a species, can use effectively and can take advantage of and can value. They are often the people who become our leaders. And a sociopath who is appropriately placed and appropriately satisfied is actually a very useful and enjoyable person with... I'm not going to get into the uses of sociopaths right now. The point is, you can't get rid of them. You have to build a system that has room for them. You have to recognize that there will always be some thieves. Now, you can say, well, if everything's given away free, that's generalized reciprocity, by the way. It's what families do. You take everything you've got, you lay it on the table, everybody takes what they need, and you sort out what's left. And then, of course, you got the sociopath, psychopath in the middle of it that takes everything off the table and makes people do favors for him, barter with him to get it back. That's what trade is. When one jackass takes everything and makes you pay him to get it back. And that guy will always be he will always be there. He might not be there today, but he'll show up. He will always show up. So you have to build it in to where you can flood him. And you know what the capitalists have done lately, and this is the book I've been reading, The Condition of the Working Class in England in 1844 by Friedrich Engels. It's free. You can look it up. It's Gutenberg Press offers it for free. And you can pick it up and you can put it on your e-reader. You can read it on your computer. You can print it out with a printer and read it in your hand. Or you can go to the library and you can pick up a copy of it. You could even just buy one off Amazon, a nice hard copy if you're a book person. So there's no excuse except your time factor. Well, how much time do you spend sitting on the toilet playing Pop a Bubble? Bubble Maze? Candy Crush? You know what I'm talking about. Oh, you sit there and answer all your messages. That's the time I'm using to read the book. Yep. You can just keep that book in the bathroom, and you can just pick it up or keep it on your phone and start reading it when you're sitting there at the bus. Because, you know, all those messages are great and all that, but really, they can wait. You can do that while you're eating supper. You could read while you're eating. You know, you can cram a book in. And this is a good book. It's still a good book. There's a lot of really good history in it that explains what happened when machines began to take over labor. And we were promised at some point that all of us would become the leisure class, that all of us would eventually simply sit back and the machines would take care of all our material needs and we wouldn't need to work anymore. And nobody said, well, how are we going to pay the rent? Because in those days you didn't have rent to pay, generally speaking. You lived in a house that your daddy built, you know, like you had land. It may not be yours, but it was yours technically because you and your family had lived there forever, and all you really had to do was send a few loaves of bread up to the castle every month, every week, whatever. You know, you just had to share what you had with the guy up the street who had the army because, you know, he might put his army on you. And frankly, that army was darn useful because when marauders came, he'd send the army out and protect you. And he also was useful because he didn't eat everything you sent him. Some of it he stuck in a nice, secure place where other people's armies couldn't get it, and the greedy boy in town couldn't get it. And when you were starving, he opened it up and he distributed it. That was the general concept of what a king, a lord, or a chieftain was supposed to do with the taxes. He was supposed to take it in, use what he needed, and you wanted him to live well because he was a representation of your wealth. If your king was wealthy, it showed everybody else how well you were doing. So it was a point of pride to have one person in your community that you dressed up fancy and paraded around showing everybody that you were capable of dressing them up fancy. Like how the size of your wedding is an indication of the wealth of your family. And so he kept all that stuff and then used it again to take care of you. And that was the general idea, that you basically chose one person who was going to watch over your surplus and redistribute it when you needed it. So the greedy boy in the background didn't have the option to make you bend over backwards and, I don't know, give him sexual favors or let him eat your babies or whatever heinous thing this fool might ask of you. You had someone that you had picked or that had been raised up and trained by his daddy in the case of hereditary lordships, to understand your needs and to look after you. That was the ideal. Now, in the reality, psychopaths turn up there too. And psychopaths figure out how to manipulate the elections and democracy. And we've been plagued by these people. Continually plagued. And we still haven't figured out how on earth are we going to deal with the psychopath in our midst and keep him from ruining the whole scene. So Friedrich Engels explains how we went from, well, I mean, I haven't finished the book yet, but the first chapter, he immediately goes into it. He explains a weaver. At one time, you had a man and his family sitting in his cottage. The woman would spin the wool. The kids would card the wool. The woman would spin the wool. The father would weave it. The family would use the fabric and dress themselves. And if that was, you know, if they didn't have a big enough garden to feed themselves and or there wasn't enough food flowing in, they could work a little harder, weave a little more, sell it, and use it to buy their bread and meat. And most of their food would have come from their back garden, from their plot of chickens, their couple of hogs, and of course they had some sheep. And people eat mutton and lamb. All of the male lambs were food because they don't grow a good enough wool coat, and you just really can't have that many rams in a flock. And so they had this sort of a harmonious existence that just went on day by day, and they didn't go anywhere, and they didn't think about it, and they didn't care. They had their simple joys in life, and they were just ignorant folk. And now Frederick talks about them a bit like noble savages, and that's kind of disrespectful. They simply were the ordinary ignorant people, and they still exist. They really don't crawl up out of their own little circle of influence, and they don't want to, and I don't see why they should have to. If they're happy, they're happy. If they're fed, they're fed. If they're well, they're well. Isn't that what and then their children grow up, and sometimes they go to school and surprise us all with some genius discoveries. And that life isn't supposed to be some constant pursuit of enlightenment or heroism. We're not supposed to have to, each one of us, grow up and become a hero and solve some great trouble in society. It's cold coffee, by the way. I make iced coffee. I add sweetener and sweetener usually maple syrup, but I ran out, so it's coconut sap syrup, and in this case a little bit of coconut cream and almond milk, and that's my coffee, and it's nice. And I have 2 a day. If I have less, I'm sad because I really love my coffee, and if I have more, my neuropathy flares up. When I'm cold, it flares up, but I'm happy to say that it's only in the tips of my fingers, whereas last winter it had reached all the way to here and all the way to my knees, and last spring I couldn't even squat, but I can now. Watch me squat. I know, it's dumb. It's really dumb. But look how fast this little old lady can. Down and up. Down and up. Down and up. Now, when you're an active person like me, that's important. That's extremely important. So, I am so thrilled that I can do that now. It's the little things in life, they say. Which is the whole point of the proletariat. What does proletariat mean? Simply and only, just very basically, a person who works for a wage. A person who works for his living. You've got the bourgeoisie. These are people whose capital works for it. Well, not capital. They don't work for a living exactly because they've got employees who do the work. Mind you, the bourgeoisie usually see themselves as working very hard. They generally manage the store so they spend a lot of time sitting at a desk doing the paperwork. But their income is spread out over months, and they can pretty much predict it, and they've got a lot of resilience financially, whereas the proletariat have no financial resilience. You lose your job, you've got maybe 30 days before you're screwed because if you don't find more work, because you've only got 1 month's rent paid. You've only got a couple weeks worth of food in the house. That's what a proletariat is. And so Mr. Weaver and his family, he was a guy that didn't have to weave today if he didn't want to weave today. If he woke up with a headache, he didn't have to get any work done today. There were some chores that had to be done, he and the wife and the kids. But I mean, if the whole family was down with the flu, there was no great crisis. It was just an unfortunate day, and then you could take the time. And then you could pick up work a little harder afterwards. And your work, the amount of work you did, had a direct bearing on your prosperity. But when they became proletariat, when a guy down the road opened a weaving factory, because he talks about the invention of the machines that allowed them to industrialize weaving. All of a sudden, Mr. Weaver dude's work simply didn't add up. I mean, for one thing, he couldn't produce work as perfect as a machine. We know that. In fact, it's why handwork is now worth more than machine work, because we recognize the difference, and for us it feels more human. It's like, this was made by hand. it's so much more real, and all of the little irregularities and imperfections in it actually have become charming, because it indicates that this is made by hand versus something that's made by machine, which is so predictable and regular and straight and even, you know. The machine makes this, and it's perfect, and it's beautiful, and back in those days, it was like the finest craftsmanship you could possibly never afford, suddenly made affordable. Whereas this was like just plain old rough homespun. So the weaver no longer sold his product. Couldn't sell his product unless he gave it away cheap. Because people could go to the factory and get a much better quality fabric for a whole lot less money. So what did the weaver do? Well, he went to the factory and he said, "Hi, I'm a weaver, can I have work?" And I said, "Sure, sit down here and, change this spool every 5 minutes," or whatever factory job it was. "And you do this from this period, from this time in the morning until this time at night. And if you show up faithfully every day, and we can rely on you, and we never have to wonder who's going to do that job, then we will pay you a wage." Now, if he wakes up sick, he's still got to go to work, or he's going to get fired on the spot.